tell the truth about it. And unfortunately, the truth about it is not very attractive. But if you think maybe it was a lectionary, and so it's a bunch of disconnected reading that were supposed to be used at different times of the year. Now it makes sense. And the Aleph, Lam, Mim, and all the other letters at the beginning of the passages are telling you where to go next. That there's not a single Quranic text, and that these variants have existed from the beginning of the Quranic tradition itself. And the stories about the different dialects and all that were obviously made up to explain the differences, rather than the differences actually arising from some decision on the part of a false prophet or on the part of Allah.
Welcome to Events and History, where we explore the origins, teachings, and historical development of Islam with a fact-based, analytical approach.
What happens when someone treats the Quran not simply as a sacred text to be believed, but as a document to be investigated, compared, questioned, and critically examined? That is exactly what Robert Spencer attempts with his revealing book, The Critical Qur'an. In this interview, Spencer explains why he believes the Quran deserves the same kind of historical and textual scrutiny that biblical scholars have applied to the Bible for centuries. The discussion dives into Quranic variants, the qira'at, classical Muslim commentaries, mysterious opening letters, and theories connecting portions of the Quran to earlier Syriac and Aramaic Christian traditions. They also tackle some particularly sensitive passages concerning Jesus and the crucifixion. But perhaps the biggest question is this: if the Quran has always existed in one perfectly preserved form, why are there competing readings, manuscripts, and centuries of interpretive development? And what do they actually tell us? In this video, Dr. J. Smith is going to unpack the arguments and examine why this conversation has generated so much controversy. Let's dive in.
Well, here we are, and I'm back again with my good old friend, Robert Spencer. It's been a few months. Wow, has it been about a year since we've been together?
Oh, yeah. It's good to see you, Jay.
Yeah, and sitting in the same office at the same chair with the same smile as ever. But we're not gonna discuss anything controversial today, and this is not what we're doing. We're not going to talk about jihad or any of these type of things. We're all actually going to talk about this book right here. This is the Critical Qur'an. And folks, if you don't have it, go get it. You need to get this, because this is a real compendium. This is one of those kind of books that every library should have, and you keep on your shelf, not to read all the way through, but to keep as like an encyclopedia, as a book to refer to, a reference book, so that you can go back when you get to a verse you don't understand. Look at this book, because this will not only help you understand it, it will show you a lot of ideas in areas that you probably haven't heard before, and probably will not, had not Robert Spencer taken the time and the effort to put it all together in one compendium. Now, obviously, it's a critical Quran. Explain that. Why the title?
Yeah, Jay, I actually meant that to have two or three meanings, at least two offhand. One is that it is an attempt at a critical edition. There's no critical edition of the Quran at this point. You can find lots of critical editions of the Bible. And of course, by that, just in case anybody's not clear what I mean, that you can find very easily the Oxford Annotated Bible, many others. They have variant readings noted, different manuscripts giving you different versions of the various verses. They have explanatory notes with some historical critical explorations as to what might be the actual historical underpinnings of the various accounts in the Gospels, in the other parts of the Bible, and so on. And some of them, of course, come to different conclusions. They may disagree with one another, but a critical edition is as opposed to an edition that is designed for devotion. A devotional Bible will perhaps have aids to prayer and worship and passages of the scripture that illustrate certain points about the Christian faith, illustrated and explained, that kind of thing. And there are plenty of Qur'ans like that. But you can't find a Qur'an that is a critical Qur'an that actually does what those historical critical Bibles do, give you variant readings and explanations of where the text may have come from and what it might really mean, and so on. And so I thought, well, you know, J.D. Salinger, the novelist, the guy that wrote The Catcher in the Rye, he said once, somebody asked him, why do you write the books that you write? And he said, I write the books I want to read that don't exist. So I have to make them come into existence so then I can read them. And I thought, I want a critical Qur'an. There isn't one, so I'll have to do it. And it's just a first attempt. I hope there will be many other critical Qur'ans in the future. And I don't expect them all to agree with the conclusions that I have come to in this one. But I hope that this is, in a certain sense, unlocking the floodgates and making it possible for people to think, well, I can do this. It's not necessarily a forbidden topic. It's not something that is completely off limits as the academic world has treated it all this time.
Well, obviously, just by what you've said there, some people who are listening to you are going to be inflamed. They're going to become very angry, because even the idea of variant, the word variant in the Quran is anathema to Muslims. Because if you talk to any Muslim, if there are Muslims listening, you're going to say there's no such thing as a variant Quran. We don't have variants. There's not one word, not one letter that's changed. It is eternal. Chapter 85, verse 22 is very clear in the Quran, makes that claim for itself. Chapter 10, verse 15, chapter 18, verse 27 says that no man can change God's holy word. Chapter 15, verse 9 stipulates that Allah himself protects it. So the Quran makes these claims, and here is Robert Spencer saying, no, there are variants and they need to be explained. And I'm sitting here keeping from laughing, because the reason why no one's written this, Robert, is no one would dare write what you've just said.
Yeah, it takes a certain kind of craziness, I suppose. People say, aren't you afraid for your life, or something like that? And you know, Jay, it's not as if, I mean, I'm just like any other individual. I'm not saying that I'm so extraordinarily courageous or something like that. Quite the contrary. But the fact is, I've never been worried about that, because nobody knows. You know, nobody knows if they're going to have the next day. Nobody knows what might happen, and people die all the time. Everybody's going to die. It seems to me to be afraid to speak the truth and to explore these things because of that, I just don't understand it. And so
nonetheless, what you're doing, you're chewing off a huge amount here. And this is why I wanted to bring you on board. This is why I want to get this book out there, because you tend to do this, Robert. Did Muhammad exist? That book you came out in 2011, or was it 2012, blew open that whole debate, so much so that you've had to rewrite it again just 2 years ago to get all the newest material, because you opened the floodgates of research, including myself. And that's what we love about you, Robert, is you take ideas that no one else has dared do. You ask questions that no one else has dared ask. And you don't just ask the questions, you come up with answers. And it's the answers and it's the material that you work with that you've done with this book here. The reason why no one's ever done a critical assessment of the Quran is it's not very healthy to do so. You could die, you could be killed. And I know you say that I'm used to doing that, but you know, I think the Lord is protecting you, and I think you do have a certain angel over top of you.
Fact is, I am aware of the risks. I've been getting a lot of sharp uptick in threats since this book came out. I understand the parameters of this, and I hope that I pray the Lord does protect me and continue to protect me. Thank God that He's protected me all this time. And you know, that's up to Him. I feel like I hope I have opened up, like I said, opened up the floodgates to this, and you said as well that there will be many others, because there's plenty more that could be done with this text. Oh, well, I also wanted to just say before we go on, I said at the beginning there were two meanings at least to critical, and the other one is that it is critical. It's not a devotional Quran. I'm not a believer in Islam. I don't believe even that Islam is a very good thing for people. And I don't make any secret about that in this book either. It's not that I'm trying to go out of my way to denigrate Muslims, certainly, or Islam even, but to tell the truth about it. And unfortunately, the truth about it is not very attractive.
Okay.
And to be honest,
You did mention that we have critical editions of the Bible, have had for decades, if not even centuries, since the 1800s with Wellhausen and the University of Tübingen, where they came out with strong critical editions on the Book of Moses, the JEDB documentary hypothesis, redacted criticism, source criticism. I mean, these criticism, form criticisms have all existed against the Bible, not started and not created by biblical criticism, but enlarged and certainly matured by biblical criticism. So in some ways, you're just carrying out a tradition that is very much around, has been around since the 1800s.
And people said, I thought one of the nicest things that anybody's ever said about any book that I've written is an Amazon review. It's one of the more recent ones. And the guy says, this is the book, in a certain sense, Spencer is supplying the lack because the academy has not done this. And this is the book that the academia should have produced decades ago, if not years ago. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do, trying to fill in this gap and begin to oversee the catching up of scholars of the Quran with what's been being done with the Bible for, as you noted, several hundred years now. And there's hundreds of books, hundreds you can read that are historical critical explorations of the Bible and even evaluations of it from various other kinds of moral standpoints, and people criticizing Jesus on from various perspectives and so on. And nobody bats an eye. But suddenly, if you say, "Gee, it's terrible that that Allah would make people and say I could have guided them to the truth, but instead I'm going to fill hell with men," that's a bit of a difficult thing to say. Then suddenly, you're hateful and bigoted and Islamophobic. I think, well, that's exactly what the text does say, chapter 32, verse 13. And there's another place as well that's escaping me at the moment. Do you have 693? Is it, or 1693? I think it's 16.
I have the hadith that say that the hell is going to be filled with women and paradise is going to be filled with men.
There's all these things, and people don't know, because even in the universities today, or maybe especially in the universities today, it's all positive about Islam. Even back in the 80s, when I was first studying Islam in graduate school, it was all positive. It was all how wonderful various aspects of it were, and we never discussed jihad. We never discussed the treatment of women. We never heard those hadiths about hell being filled with women, or in multitudes of other things that are part of Islam. So this book tries to fill in the gap.
It's not very healthy. And we've said this many times before. Now, what's fascinating, the next question that people will throw at us is, why and how can you don't speak Arabic, you're not a native Arab speaker. How could you be trusted with something of this type of magnitude? But you kind of gave it right here in the subtitle. Let me just read the subtitle here, where you said, explained from key Islamic commentaries and contemporary historical research. So this is not you. This is not your research. You haven't done the Arabic studies on these words. You don't even claim to do that. So explain what you have done here. It is here, but most people don't know that. If you could go ahead and unpack that for us.
Absolutely, Jay. It's a funny thing, because a lot of the Islamic apologists out on Twitter, and elsewhere, they've been saying, you're not, they say you don't know a word of Arabic and things like that, which is wildly overstated. I know far more Arabic than they think. But the fact is, you're right. I'm not a native Arabic speaker. I'm not even able to carry on a competent conversation in it. But the fact is that when you talk about word studies in Arabic and explorations of the meanings of the words, I know where to find all those. And I took them into account in this book. And when I'm talking about contemporary historical research, I'm talking about people who do know the Arabic and do know what the historical background of these things are, and I'm reporting on what they say. So, as you said, this is not my conclusions.
Yeah.
This has a compendium of the contemporary research into the Quran.
I mean, you here, if you just look, here's this first page. Well, page 13, I just put it up open to the cow. I just open it up at random. You only have a little bit of text, but look at all the commentary you have here. You put an awful lot of commentary explaining what the exegetes say, who these are, and you use really four major exegetes. If you don't mind, if I go through each one of them, because I thought it was fascinating. You use well, first of all, you go to, I just want to get him here. Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir is probably the most famous, who died in 1372. So he would be the classic. He's from a classic period. He's considered probably the earliest of the exegete. There, I mean, there's Tabari, who is earlier than him, but it's Ibn Kathir that most people go to. Why did you use him?
Well, that's why.
Okay.
Because people go to him. See, what the idea is to help people who are not Muslim to understand, how does the average Muslim understand this passage when he reads it? And so here again, I'm not going to undertake to explain it. I'm not going to presume. But I go to Ibn Kathir, I go to Qurtubi, I go to the two Jalals and see.
I mean, that's fascinating because they're 1459 and 1505. So you're taking really archaic material from 1372, 1459, 1505.
Yeah, archaic, I would respectfully disagree.
Oh.
It's old, but archaic is another thing, because for the average Muslim who is not a scholar, who's reading the Quran, who thinks, I want to try to understand what this is all about, it's much more likely he's going to go to Ibn Kathir than to some 21st century scholar. And these people, these works have endured and are still central to the understanding that Muslims have of Islam and the Quran, in a way that that the modern scholars simply don't have that kind of traction.
Yeah.
So
yes, but you also go to Maududi, who is from my part of the world. He was born and grew up in Deobandi, real close. I used to go right through his town whenever I went to visit my parents in India, and then moved to Pakistan in 1947, died in 1979. And you also use Madani, Muhammad Ishaq Ilahi Madani, who just died in 2002. These are modern scholars. So you're using both and, I understand.
Right, exactly. That you have Maududi, of course, is internationally influential.
Yeah.
And so when I'm the same argument that I'm using that I just gave you for using Ibn Kathir also applies to using Maududi. It's not that he's new and they're old. It's that both of them are extremely mainstream. Yep. Both of them are, if you go into, for example, if you go into any Islamic bookstore in the United States right now, or Europe for that matter, or I would expect pretty much all over the world, you're going to find Ibn Kathir. You're going to find Maududi. These guys are the central people to understand the Quran that are presented by Muslims for their fellow Muslims.
Let me just say, so people are aware of that, Maududi is from the Indian subcontinent. That's why he's so popular. What people don't realize is that a lot of the Indian subcontinent Muslims get fed up with the Arabs, who don't deal with some of the more modern problems, especially when it comes to Christianity, because they don't, most of your Arab scholars, Muslim scholars, aren't even aware of Christianity or much of the debate that's going on. Maududi is very much aware of Christianity, and that's why he's much more representative of modern day, certainly modern day problems. And that's he started the Deobandi movement. He was the one, if you go to any of your Indians or Pakistanis or Bangladeshis, they go to Maududi before anybody else because he resonates with them. Madani the same way. And I think it's great that you have taken two scholars that are very well known today, as well as the I don't want to use the word archaic, I won't use it anymore, but ancient or early scholars that are certainly have given have been around since, well, in this case, since the 14th century.
And Maududi is really extraordinary. I think that his influence is far beyond the subcontinent. It's international. I mean, when I say I think that he's pretty much in any bookstore in the United States.
And there's a reason, Robert. You know why?
Tell me.
Because a lot of his stuff is in English. And remember, All your
Well,
English Pakistanis and Bangladeshis speak English, and all their education is English. Maududi has been written up in English. All of his material is in English. So it gets all over England and Britain and also United States. That's why we hear him more than anybody else, not so much the Arab scholars today.
yeah, so there you go. And then you have the fact that he is dealing with communism, dealing with other contemporary movements, and actually trying to reframe Islam using Marxist language to attract Marxists to Islam. And it's an extraordinary intellectual endeavor, I think, actually. And Qutb really too, in a different way, is trying to engage with the modern world. And so that, for that reason also, they both deserve, although Maududi has more of a place, they both have a place in this book.
Now, you segueing over into the you use Pickthall, and I was a little surprised that you used Pickthall for your standard for your English translation. Why Pickthall?
Well, in the first place, I've got to say that it's Pickthall, but it's modernized and it's revised so that it's much easier to read than Pickthall's original translation. And because, I mean, and also it's changed completely when it comes to various important passages where it appears that his translation was inferior to others, and we opted for a different reading. But I actually did that because I wanted to defang the objection that people were going to say that this is not a guy who's fluent in Arabic. How can he produce a new English translation? And a lot of the people who are criticizing the book without having looked at it, they don't realize that we're working from the basis of a translation that is one of the foundational translations of the Quran into English, written by a Muslim for fellow Muslims, and that is still popular today and considered to be in the main reliable. And so that is, it's hard, they really can't assail the translation that's in the Critical Qur'an without attacking Pickthall, which gets them into some difficulties. And then Pickthall is modernized and revised in light of various discoveries of modern scholarship, various philological investigations that are explained in the notes.
Some scholars today prefer people like Arbery or Droge because they do to the Arabic and the Quran what the NASB has done to the Hebrew and the Greek and the Bible. They go right word by word by word and follow it through, so it's probably the most correct, but they're difficult to read, whereas Pickthall is much easier to read.
Yeah, and so you have to balance the two. The thing about translating is any language to any language, there is a pitfall, not a Pickthall, in going word by word. I like Arbery a whole lot because he goes word by word, but I do find it sometimes that it obscures rather than elucidates what is going on for an English-speaking reader. And so I thought Pickthall is kind of a happy medium, that he gives you the flavor of the text, often goes word by word, but does not do so when the meaning needs to be brought out in a way that requires a departure. And that's, that's just something that always happens with translations. That's why one translation of the same book is different from another.
Yeah. I just, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about this book here, the Critical Qur'an. So it's a critical edition. That means it's going to look at not only the unpack the verses, but also give you the background to why possibly these verses were added, why they weren't added, who is responsible, what do some of the exegetes say? Exegetes, for those who actually unpack the Quran, people like Ibn Kathir or the Jalalains or Maududi or Madani. These are the famous ones, and you've taken some of the best ones out there. I just want to open it up and kind of show people how you did it. It's just so that they could see. What I like is you not only put the verses up here, you unpack it down here. So this is the very first one, the opening, which is the Fatiha. Only 7 verses. You would think not much to say, yet you take a whole 2 pages of background material, and it's amazing. That's the kind of stuff that I think that we need to see. The fact that you take, I'm sorry, not 2 pages, 2 complete columns, just looking and unpacking it. And what you did is you did something that I haven't seen yet done before, and that is you actually looked and zeroed in not only on the first verse, but you also zeroed on the seventh verse.
Yes.
Those who cause you anger and those who have fallen away. You take that and you unpack what is and what do the exegetes say about that. Most people are not even aware that those are the Jews and the Christians. It's actually the cursing prayer against us. And you actually put it there.
Because, you know, there's so many politicians nowadays who invite imams into, say, the state legislature over here, or a prayer meeting in a church or something like that. And the imam prays the Fatiha,
yeah,
and the assembled Christians and Jews and whatever, they say amen, and they have no idea that they've just been cursed.
Not only that, we have a lot of people in our churches who are asking Christians to memorize those 7 verses, to go into mosque and pray it with them. And we had a church in California do that for my denomination. And I said, please don't do that. You're cursing yourself. The Muslims know you're cursing yourself. They're patting themselves on the back. And I got a lot of backlash from the church itself and from the pastor saying, you don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Smith. And I say, I may not know what I'm talking about. Then why don't you just read the critical edition of Robert Spencer's book, and he'll set you straight. Because it's not you that's saying this. It's what the exegetes have said it. It's what the exegetes say about this verse. And we have to be aware of that. Otherwise, we're going to walk into these minefields one after another. Now, I want to bring up 1 or 2 questions I have for you. Now, I want to bring up 1 or 2 questions I have for you, Robert. One of them is chapter 3, verse 55, which is a huge verse for those of us who are defending Jesus and the crucifixion. You know that in chapter 4, verse 157, it's very clear that he was not crucified, another was given his image. And you do a great job on chapter 4, 157, showing that this is a probably borrowed from a Gnostic writing. And
Yes.
the 3rd century, that this is probably the first occasion where that could be borrowed from. Again, being very critical, not Muslims are not going to like that, because that assumes, therefore, it's someone putting this together. Whoever the person who's writing chapter 4, verse 157 is borrowing from another source. Source criticism is harmful to the veracity of the Quran. What I found interesting is in chapter 3, verse 55, confronts this head on concerning the word mutawafika in Arabic. I've caused you to die to take you to myself. There's one more I want to bring up before we go, and that's chapter 19, verse 33.
Okay.
If you go 19, verse 33 on page 213 of your book, because this is about Jesus, and it confronts chapter 4, verse 157, because that's Jesus as a child saying, blessed be me the day I was born, the day I die. So that's the future, because he's a child, and the day I rise again. When Muslims try to come back and say, well, he's talking about the future, of course, he's a child. Of course, it's in the future tense, because as a baby, he wouldn't die yet until he was an adult.
Yeah, except if they didn't crucify him, well, obviously, you know the problem.
There's why you need 355 and 1933. They confront 4157. So one of the things that I thought was fascinating, you bring up in chapter 2, verse 1, you bring up these letters, Aleph, Lam, Mim. And these have always, I mean, this whole part, about 25% of the Quran is known as what we call dark passages. These are well known. The scholars know that. Nobody understands them. Just these letters are part of those dark passages. And you give an answer to it. You actually show where it actually comes from. And I think it's fascinating. Explain to the people where these letters come from that no scholar seems to know, no Muslim scholar seems to know, but you seem to have an answer.
It's Christoph Luxemburg's answer, and I think it's compelling that he says that it is liturgical markings. You know, Jay, I'm an Orthodox Christian. Yeah, that's the book, the Syro-Aramaic reading of the Quran. And in Orthodox Christianity, we have what's known as a lectionary. The Catholics have one as well. You know, instead of just the pastor picking.
Explain what that is.
Before we continue, please, guys, like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments section so we can get out of the YouTube algorithm's shadow ban and be able to reach others. Thank you, and God bless you. I'm glad we're learning new things each day about the true history of Islam, the Quran, and Muhammad. But more importantly, you need to know about Jesus, and no better place to find him than in the Bible. The Logos Bible makes it easy to get the message in its original form. Check it out in the products below. It helps you to learn more about Jesus, who is our Lord, our Savior, our Messiah. Now, let's continue with the video.
Yeah, instead of the pastor picking a passage of the scripture to read and to preach on for a given day, there's a whole schedule for the whole year and a special book that has the scriptures rearranged in the order that they will generally be read during the year. There are a lot of exceptions, a lot of changes, a lot of things that vary depending on what time of year it is and what other feasts may be interposed and so on. But there's a general book called the lectionary, and it has the readings one after the other. So they're not in the order in which they are in the Bible. They're in the order in which they're read in the church. And so if you think about the Quran in the first place, that's the first thing that might make sense of it. That the Quran's a chaotically ordered book, that it doesn't have a thematic order, it doesn't have a chronological order, it doesn't follow historically either the life of Muhammad as we have it in the Sirah or the chronology of the stories it's recounting. But if you think maybe it was a lectionary, and so it's a bunch of disconnected readings that were supposed to be used at different times of the year. Now it makes sense. And the Aleph, Lam, Mim, and all the other letters at the beginning of the passages are telling you where to go next. Because I'll tell you something.
So these are keys. These are keys, you might say.
Yeah. If you were an Orthodox priest and you want to do the liturgy for a Sunday morning, the prayer service for Sunday morning, you can't just go to one book and read it all out. It's not all in there. You have to get a piece from here for the readings of the day, the hymns of the day, the gospel of the day, and they're all in different books. And so you might have you have a central book where it will tell you what to find, where to go to find what you need for this particular day. Like say the 6th Sunday after Pascha, Easter. And so you have this gospel reading and this prayer and this hymn, and they're all marked where to go to get them. But you got to go get them in different books. So what Luxembourg is saying is that Aleph Lam Mim is exactly that kind of thing, that you want to go to whatever they were. We don't know what they were now, but you want to go to the place where the liturgical readings are found that you're supposed to do after this section, and that's what the letters stand for.
Just I'm going to put up 2 other books that he's talking about. He's referring to these 3 books. This is the first one that came out by Gunther Lulling in the 1970s, where he looked at and took off the dots and put on Aramaic dots and found all these hymns, beautiful hymns written in Aramaic that made up an awful lot of the poetry that's in the Quran. That was a source for it. You have this book here that's written by Gabriel Salma, who is an Aramaist himself. That's his mother tongue, and has been trying to tell the world much of the Quran comes from us. Give credit where credit is due. We are Syriac Aramaics, and we are the ones that can read it in its original language. And then, of course, you have this one here written by Christoph Luxembourg. That's not his real name. He has to go in hiding as well. Isn't this tragic that he can't even give us? We don't even know who the real man is. We do know that he also is a Syriac scholar, and he is the one that looked at these 25 different, these 25 dark, 25% of the Quran that's dark passages, and was able to reproduce it by using a 7-step process of taking out the dots, taking out the vowels, replacing them with Aramaic dots and vowels, and then looking at Aramaic lectionary lexicons to find what the meaning of the words are. And by doing that, he not only found that these were lectionaries, he found that many of them are actually poems written by Saint Ephrem in the 4th century. Amazing. Surah 23
is one of the most popular hymnographers of the Orthodox tradition. And a great deal of the poems that he wrote and hymns that he wrote are still used to this day in the Orthodox liturgy. And so from there, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump. If you see that a great many of these things that are in the Quran are just Arabicizing the Aramaic hymns of Saint Ephrem, and you realize that Saint Ephrem is used liturgically, well, then that supports his argument in regards to the mysterious letters.
Robert, what you're doing is such a boon for all of us, because you're unpacking this material, you're adding it to it, you're putting it in the footnotes and saying, here is a part of a lectionary. Here are letters that show you where the reader, the priest, is supposed to go from each of the context. It unpacks it so brilliantly because it shows that almost all of the Quran is borrowed from other sources. It's borrowed from, you're right, your Syriac, Aramaic sources, from Ethiopic sources. We now know a lot comes from Hebrew sources. We're even finding that some of it comes from Zoroastrian sources, Sassanian sources. So all of this makes sense now when if you were to take it back to its original source, it will show you what the meaning. What I love is that much of these hymns and the most beautiful parts of the Quran are all about Jesus.
Yes.
He's been taken out of it. We need to take him back to Jesus. But that's a beauty thing about your Critical Qur'an. You started this process. This is just the first of probably many volumes that you're going to come up with. And I hope you keep going and adding new material as new and newer material comes out. We want to see not only the 2023 edition, we want to see the 2024, 2025 as it becomes a real handy encyclopedia that we can keep on our shelves. So whenever there is a question, now you do, before I end, I just want to bring up one more, and you do get into the whole qira'at problem. Can you explain why you brought this up in your critical edition?
Well, it has everything to do with the variant readings. That in the Islamic tradition, of course, as we've discussed before, and as you've gone into, I used a great deal of your own research, of course, in this material. The idea, there are hadith that explain, and it's a foundation of Islamic theology, that the Quran was revealed in 7 readings, and these are the qira'at, that each one, Islamic apologists will say this is just dialects of Arabic for the pronunciation, but there are actual variants, and it does seem as if that the stories about the Quran being revealed in these different dialects were apologetic in intent and designed to cover up the fact that there were variant readings in different manuscripts. But these became entire manuscript traditions, and it becomes quite complicated with various people then copying the different traditions, and then it becomes more than 7, because then there are 10 readers, and it becomes a dizzying number of different variants. And then, of course, we have Hatun going, was it to Morocco, and finding, what was it, 35 different...
No, she only found about 5 or 6 in Morocco. She came back to England and showed me them. And I said, you can find a good 30 of them. So she started sending people to Jordan. She started sending people. They were going to Jordan. She didn't send them. Or they were going to Morocco, or they were going to Yemen. Those are the 3 countries. And she says, whenever you're going into a marketplace, here they are. Here are the 30 right here. These are the 30 that you need to look for. And you have the 7 right here in green. These, and I'll put this up here on the screen here. These are the initial 7. Well, what's interesting, and you do this in your book, you do this in your Critical Qur'an, you give the dates to these. That destroys this argument that these could have been given to Muhammad. Because look at their dates. 736, 770, 738, 785, 745, 772, 805. These are a century or more after Muhammad. None of them knew Muhammad. None of them were there to receive these different dialects. And these are not dialectical differences. Oh. These are vowelization differences and also diacritical differences.
And I note a lot of them in the notes. I also note that there are many others. A lot of them I left out because I wanted to give ones that would be absolutely clear and easy to understand for the English-speaking reader, and not get caught up into a lot of things that would be very difficult for people who didn't know Arabic to understand. The ones that are noted in the Critical Qur'an are just designed to give the reader the understanding that there's not a single Quranic text. and that these variants have existed from the beginning of the Quranic tradition itself. And the stories about the different dialects and all that were obviously made up to explain the differences rather than the differences actually arising from some decision on the part of a false prophet or on the part of Allah to reveal his perfect word in different versions.
What I think is fascinating is Ibn Mujahid, who was given the responsibility to choose the first seven, which start from 736 and go 8 to 85. He did that choosing in 936, just before he died in the 10th century. But that's just the first seven. The next 14, which were two students of each of the seven, was chosen by Al-Shatibi in 1194. That's the 12th century. And yet then you have our good old friend Al-Jazari, who comes along and chooses another 3 qira'ats and 6 students, all of this in 1429. That's the 15th century. That's 800 years after Muhammad. So this is not something that all happened. Muslims think this all happened at the time of Muhammad. It continued on for 800 years until finally in 1924, it was unmanageable, and they could not have standardized tests with 30 different derivations on every verse. They had to just choose one, and they chose this one, the Hafs text. This guy is from Al-Shatibi's list. He was chosen in the 12th century, but he was writing in 796. That's the 8th century. That's 144 years after Muhammad. Why did they choose this one? Do you know the reason they chose Al-Haddad chose this one in 1924?
Why?
Because the Ottomans chose him.
Oh, well, there you go. Yes.
There you go. It's because this is the Ottoman choice. Why did they choose it? Because it was the closest to them in Kufa, and it was the most simple to understand. That is not how you choose a text. I was fascinating. We could go on and on for a whole hour on this, but thanks for putting that into your book. I mean, you've got a number of good ones there, and I see the ones that you have are probably the strongest ones. You are correct. They're just between Hafs and Warsh, we have 5,000 different variants. But between all of them, if you look at all 30, it's over 93,000. We're soon to approach 100,000. So you could not put that all in this book. But the ones you did put here, and I hope people are listening, look and see the variants you did put here, because they are all manageable. They're ones that you can use. They are ones that make a lot of sense. And folks, they don't just change the vowels and the dots. They change the meanings. And when you change the meanings, as Robert's going to show you, they change the theology in sometimes, they change the doctrine at other times, and they change the practice. All three things happen. You can't just have a neutral change just because people, Muslims always say, well, it didn't change any meaning. It didn't change any meaning. It's the same word. It's just a different dialect. No, it absolutely does change the theology and the doctrine, and you folks need to know about that. So listen, Robert, this has been great. I want to thank you. You've done a great job. You I don't know where you have the energy to get all this writing done, but I guess you must have an amazing encyclopedic mind, because you have an ability to pull threads in from all different areas and bring it down. And what I love about your books is that you communicate it so the layman can understand it.
Well, that's really what I can do. I don't. People, it's a funny thing, Jay, because a lot of times the Islamic apologists come at me and say, this guy says he's a scholar, and he's not a scholar of Islam. And, you can call me whatever you want. I don't care. It really, the answer to that depends on what your definition of a scholar is. But all I've ever claimed to do is pass on the results of what the people who are doing the actual investigating do. I do think that I can break it down and make it clear in a way that it's not so accessible when you read the Syriac and Aramaic. No criticism intended of Professor Luxemburg, but his book is hard to read. And so a lot of people are discouraged. And so in the Critical Qur'an, you get the thrust of his argument completely credited to him, beginning to end, but it's in a manner that people who are not specialists in this field can understand.
Well, thank you for that. You are a specialist in the field. You're not the originator of the research. You're not the one doing the actual research. You're taking what those who are the linguists, those who understand the material, you're taking they're not great communicators. We know this. Anybody who studied under them, or as you could say, read their books, they don't communicate well. And what you have done You've done us all a great favor by putting it down so that we can understand that. And I want to thank you again. Folks, do get this book. It's called The Critical Qur'an. You can get it on Amazon. It's up there. And if you go into it and read it, make sure you keep it in your library. Don't read the whole thing in one night, and you'll probably get a stomach upset, because it is full of material that is not very pleasant to go to sleep on. Nonetheless, because it is critical, because it does quote and also help you understand what the original thinkers, the exegetes, are saying, what they are putting together, how they apply it. And these are Muslim exegetes. All of these are Muslim exegetes. That's why Robert is so important, because he takes that which many of us have never heard. They're too obscure for us to really pull into if you're not a Muslim yourself. If you're a Muslim scholar, you will know all about the Jalalains. You'll know about Ibn Kathir. You'll know about Maududi, and you'll certainly know about Madani. Those are well-known names, but you won't know that. So that's why let Robert do that for you. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for this book. I can't wait to make sure that I keep going from page to page. Now, as I find any problem I have with a verse, I'm just going to use this by my side to be able to unpack it, and also to be able to argue it with Muslims, because this is their book. They need to know about how it was put together and why what it's saying what it's saying. Anything you want to say?
I really appreciate you discussing this. I do think people need to know in America what's going on, what the Quran is all about. A lot of people think the problem of jihad terrorism is something, that's from the early 2000s. We're all through that now. It's all over. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We're going to hear from the jihadis again, and we need to know what they are all about. That's been the big failing, actually, of the American government and law enforcement, that they've decided that they don't need to know anything about what these people believe or why they believe it, what their motives and goals are. That's another thing that the book is designed to elucidate.
Yeah. Listen, everything that we're finding that the jihadis are doing, that ISIS did, that Al-Qaeda does, the Boko Haram, it all comes out of this book. It comes straight out of the Quran. And to understand that, you need this book to help you unpack it. I want to thank you again, Robert, for putting it together so that we have it. I want people to go out and buy it as quickly, give it to others. You should have it on your shelves. Anyhow, this has been great unpacking it for you all. This is Robert and Jay, a few hundred miles apart. Over now.
So, after hearing this discussion, the real issue may not simply be whether you agree with Robert Spencer's conclusions. The bigger question is whether the Quran should be allowed to receive the same historical and textual scrutiny that has long been applied to other ancient scriptures. The Critical Qur'an raises uncomfortable questions about variant readings, the development of the qira'at tradition, classical Islamic commentaries, and the possibility that some Quranic passages preserve material from earlier religious traditions. And the discussion about Jesus makes the stakes even higher, because questions about crucifixion, resurrection, and the origins of particular passages directly challenge familiar Islamic interpretations. Whether Spencer's conclusions ultimately stand up to further scholarship is something you should investigate for yourself. But one thing is difficult to deny. Asking questions about the origins, transmission, translation, and interpretation of an ancient text is not the same thing as refusing to take it seriously. And perhaps that is the most important takeaway from this interview. Before defending a text, shouldn't we first understand exactly what the text says, how it developed, and what evidence we have for its history? Thank you for watching this video. Please like and share this video so others can see it, and drop your thoughts respectfully in the comments. If you like Islamic events and history, please subscribe and turn on notifications for more Islamic history content. Stay with us as we sift through history to find out what the standard Islamic narrative on the Islamic Awareness website is hiding regarding the origin of Islam. Jesus is Lord.